Hi everyone, Bruno Recommends Records here, and today I'm going to touch on the pretty much forbidden subject of politics within the vinyl community.
I hate him! I hate him!
Cheese ready?
Kind of.
But please, before you make any kind of judgment, watch this video until its very end. I will also be reading from a document I wrote, so this video won't get too long. I hope you don't mind. I know that lots of people in the vinyl community avoid to talk about politics, and I totally get it. It's a very divisive theme, and especially if you earn some money from your channel, this may cause you to lose subscribers, get some negative feedback, or even get you cancelled. After all, the whole point on keeping politics away from the vinyl community is to respect everyone's opinion while allowing music to be the main thread that binds us all, the common flag, let's say. However, we all grew up listening to some artists who are not shy about expressing their political views, and whether we like it or not, at the end of the day, art is just a form of personal expression. Therefore, it's up to the artist whether he, she, or they want to keep it personal or not, and for us to react, interpret, and decide how further our distinction between art and the artist can go. And this is exactly what brings me here today. So, I recently acquired this Italian prog rock record that is very hard to find, especially for a cheap price, and I'm talking about All Maestrale from Janus, not to be confused with another Italian progressive metal band also named Janus, as well as with Janus, the UK psychedelic band whose members moved into Germany in the 70s, where they ended up recording and releasing their only album in 1972 through Harvest label. Now, before I keep going, I would like to apologize for my bad Italian accent,
Buongiorno.
even considering my obvious resemblance to Super Mario.
Mamma mia!
So, this Janus, formerly Janum, was a band from Rome who existed between 1975 and 1981. Their name comes from Janus, the Roman god of beginnings and endings as well as transitions. They carry the unique distinction in RPI history of being one of the few bands who sailed against the prevailing winds of the leftist political counterculture of the 1970s Italian music scene. RPI, for those who don't know, stands for Rock Progressivo Italiano, or Italian Progressive Rock. The leftist counterculture in Italy emerged during a period of intense political radicalization, social conflict, and cultural change known as the Years of Lead, or Anni di Piombo. And unlike the often escapist or fantasy-driven British prog scene, Italian prog became a tool for youth to express political beliefs, break from traditional authority, and align with communist or radical socialist ideologies. Its political background comes as a direct response to their former dictatorship, who lasted between 1922 and 1943, led by Benito Mussolini's party PNF, or Partito Nazionale Fascista, translated Fascist National Party. The term fascist itself comes from the Italian fascio, meaning bundle, which became the symbol of PNF, a bundle of sticks. Also, do you remember the press and some people in social media arguing that Elon Musk's raising his right arm was not a Zit Heil, but a Roman salute? Well, they're practically the same, since the origins of the Roman salute are not inherently associated with the Roman Empire, but with a fascist salute representative of Mussolini's regime. Janus' only album, Al Maestrale, is not exactly an RPI classic and has been panned for its weak production, although for an album recorded in just 6 hours, according to some sources, it has some very interesting moments, especially the Nordic folk parts that include flute or recorder, as well as the hard rock and proto-punk ones. They were formed by young members of the Italian right wing Il Movimento Sociale Italiano (MSI) or Italian Social Movement, whose name intends not to correlate with the leftist socialist movement but with Hitler's National Socialist Nazi Party. The MSI was a neo-fascist political and far-right party in Italy who presented itself until the 1990s as the defender of Italian fascism's legacy. The MSI's political program stressed traditional values, law and order, and hostility towards revolution and revolutionary movements, with its feet in the Italian nationalist pride soil. It particularly advocated a centralized state with a presidential system of government and no devolution of powers to regions.
One ring to rule them all.
MSI's Youth Front, which Janus was a part of, used to organize cultural events called Campi Hobbit, or Hobbit Fields, from 1977 to 1981. They were named after the well-known novel by J.R.R. Tolkien, and the author's work in general provided a cultural touchstone for the politicized youth of the right. This was mainly due to Italian philosopher Émile Zola's introduction to the first edition of the Lord of the Rings novel in 1970, which was interpreted as neo-fascist, but also in part because Tolkien's regard for Nordic culture. Nordicism is a racialist ideology which views the Nordic race as a superior racial group, and its influence in Italy resulted in northern Italians who regarded themselves superior to the southern Italians just because of their Nordic ascendancy. This distinction between a superior northern Italy and a degenerate and an inferior southern Italy was promoted by the Neapolitan Carlo Formici, the vice president of the Italian Academy, who in 1921 said that, quote, Italy needed a great revolution, a return to the genius of the noble Aryan race, which is after all our race, but that has been overcome by the Semitic civilization and mentality, end of quote. Also, Cesare Lombroso, an Italian Jewish criminologist and anthropologist of Sephardic descent, considered the father of modern criminology. His work stereotyping degenerates can even be seen as an influence behind Benito Mussolini's movement to clean the streets of Italy. Lombroso's theory of anthropological criminology essentially stated that criminality was inherited and that someone born criminal could be identified by physical congenital defects, which confirmed a criminal as savage or atavistic. Although Lombroso's heritage was Jewish, his theory became the perfect justification for the racial theories and eugenic tendencies of Mussolini's fascism. Besides Janus, progressive folk band La Compagnia dell'Anello, the Fellowship of the Ring,
So be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
was another of the leading right-wing formations, although Janus was undoubtedly foremost among them, even having a tribute album released in 1990s. Both groups took part in the very first Campo at Montesarchio in June 1977, but by the time Janus played at the same event in the following year, guitarist Stefano Reccioni was dead, having been shot and mortally wounded by police gunfire, according to some sources, or left-wing extremists, according to others. This happened during a political riot that became known as the Massacre di Accalarentia, or Accalarentia's Massacre, being Accalarentia this place in Rome that became the Mecca for fascist gatherings in Italy, often mentioned by Italian fascists as Accalarenzia in a direct association with the Nazi ideology. So, after all I just mentioned, and considering that I'm a person who does not condone any kind of violence, oppression, and discrimination.
Listen to me. While I will admit to a certain cynicism, the fact is that I'm a naysayer and hatchet man in the fight against violence. I pride myself in taking a punch, and I'll gladly take another because I choose to live my life in the company of Gandhi and King. My concerns are global. I reject absolutely revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love.
Why did I still acquire this record? Well, let's say that the collectionist in me won. To be honest, this is not gonna be the first and the last artist in my collection whose moral and personal values, whether political or not, make him, she, or they someone who I would never ever wanted to be associated with. Nonetheless, as a record collector and an Italian prog rock fan, this is a very hard item to find, especially if you don't live in Italy. For example, at the moment, its sale is forbidden on Discogs, and the only copies you can find available on eBay cost between 300 and 400 euros. Obviously, we're talking about the 1978 first pressing, whose self-released edition, since no label wanted to be associated with them, was mostly destroyed in a fire that happened in the library where all the copies were being stored. However, in 1997 and 1998, Cosmo Record reissued an edition with the original greenish cover and another one with a more orangey or brownish tone, being the latter the one that I acquired. The major difference between this edition and the original one, besides the already mentioned background tone, is the label that, instead of being black, has a portion of its back cover. Also, the difference in price is quite significant, although some people still ask 3 digits for one of these. There is also a limited numbered reissue from 2013 that is probably the hardest edition to find. Now, a few months ago, a friend of mine who is a record reseller was able to grab a couple of copies related with this 1998 reedition, and let's say that what he proposed to me was a too good of a deal to let it go. So I ended up with this in my collection, which is the main reason why I haven't put out my February acquisitions video yet. I confess that I wasn't sure on how to approach this, and it's been an ongoing process since the beginning of last month. So to conclude, I'm gonna end with a question to all of you. What would you do in my position? Because in my defense, I assume myself as a history buff, so having this for me is no different than having a book about fascism. History is full of good and bad examples, and none of them should be considered irrelevant for us to better understand human evolution or devolution in some cases. Also consider this, to know that there are still fascists out there who would love to have a copy of this record makes me really happy on having one, because I assure you that mine is going to be one more copy aside the burnt ones that they will never ever gonna get. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please drop a comment down below and I hope to see you in my next one. Cheers.